super chat come in. Do you think Deadpool 3 will make $1 billion? In my honest opinion, I don't. Uh, I don't think it has a chance of hitting $1 billion. Maybe that's overstating it. I don't think it'll hit $1 billion, but I also don't like $1 billion isn't normally a good benchmark for what to expect from movies. I think 2019 gave us this very strange, skewed perspective on what movies should do, but it also warped the brains of producers and executives. They all went like, we need our own $2 billion film, and just so escalated expectations to where they greenlit too many movies that cost too much money. Because in the history of cinema, less than 55 movies have made $1 billion. Mm-hmm. Every year, 700, 800 movies come out. There's like 100 wide release movies every single year, and 50 to 55 movies have made $1 billion ever. Yeah. It's not very common. And you also just had 2019, there was like movies way overperformed. There was just a lot of movies that did really, really well. And so then people are like, is cinema dead because we're not getting these $1 billion films? That's not the only R-rated movie to ever hit $1 billion is Joker. There's one of all the R-rated films ever released. One of them has hit $1 billion. And so just like to expect Deadpool 3 to do that is to put a burden on its shoulders that it's not able to carry. That it shouldn't. You shouldn't expect that movie to make that kind of money. Like maybe if it's the trailers are great, you get that Ryan Reynolds marketing, and you kind of tie in all this multiverse stuff. Maybe that'll pull enough things that people are interested. But I have such a hard time imagining that it'll do that. I think people are also starting to be like, multiverse. Yeah. Man, No Way Home was awesome. Well, multiverse movies about Spider-Man are fantastic. The rest of these I'm not so sure about. What do you think of initial thoughts of how you guys, Griffin, can it make $1 billion? Is that a good benchmark? What do you think about that?
Can it? I mean, yeah, I guess, any movie has the potential to, I guess, if you, especially in the comic book genre. But to your point, yeah, I think the interest in the multiverse is dwindling. This feels like a very, I don't know if I want to say niche, but it kind of feels like it's playing to a niche audience. Like, I don't think a lot of casual fans are gonna necessarily go out and, because like Ben Affleck is returning as Daredevil, they're gonna be like, why is Ben Affleck returning as Daredevil? That movie was terrible. Or like because I don't even know how much affinity the average moviegoer has for like the Fox X-Men stuff. So it's like, are they gonna go out to see all those cameos? They might go out to see Hugh Jackman reprise his role as Logan again. I think in the chat, Kendrick Lee actually put it best. He's like, Deadpool 3 will for sure be the highest grossing Deadpool movie. That I agree with. Will it make $1 billion? I don't know, because it's an R-rated movie. It's like, yeah, I mean, like that's kind of a big uphill battle. I mean, like you said, we've only seen it one time with Joker, and Joker is like the most popular rogue of all time. So
yeah, and there's a weird appeal. I mean, the first Suicide Squad movie, like people talk about it like it's a flop. That movie made like $800 million. It was like way overperformed because Joker was in it. People like forget Joker. People love Joker. Richard,
yeah, no. How about you? I'm looking up the numbers right now for the Deadpool movies. The first one made 782.6, and the second one made 785.8. So they're really like right in line with each other in terms of box office. I think it's got a small chance of making $1 billion. I think if there's any R-rated movie that could do it, it's Deadpool. It's got some of the right factors that could factor into it. Disney's putting it in its like prime release slot in May, which is like when all the Avengers movies came out, when Guardians 3 came out. But Guardians 3, I think it came close to 850, if I'm not mistaken, at the box office, and that was this year. And people are coming back to the theaters and everything, which is great. It's got all the multiverse stuff. It's got Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman doing Deadpool Wolverine. That'll be fun. I wouldn't expect it to cross $1 billion, but I don't think I would be shocked if it did. I'm kind of
that's a good way to phrase it.
I think I'm pulling in the more like 850 to 900 million range for it. I agree with you. It's definitely going to be the highest grossing Deadpool movie. Easy. I think there's no chance that it's not the highest grossing Deadpool movie. But $1 billion is a tall ask. And like you were saying, Sean, earlier, like I did a thing on my Twitter about like, I think it was when Little Mermaid was coming out, about how it wasn't doing so great at the box office. I think something of the 50 to 55 movies that you said hit $1 billion, I think like 31 of them have come out sometime in the last 15 years too.
Right.
And 2019 obviously was such an anomaly because all 3 MCU movies that year made $1 billion. And then there was Endgame, which is Endgame. So like I said, I don't expect it to hit $1 billion, but I wouldn't be shocked if it does.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that we kind of overestimate how popular the X-Men are.
Yeah.
Deadpool's the highest grossing movie in the X-Men franchise. Some of that maybe is the first X-Men came out. It literally came out 23 years ago. So that's a long time in the history of movies, of box office and things like that. But they're not like X-Men was a hit. 2 years later, Spider-Man was a super hit. And you can see like the difference between how the love between those two things. And Spider-Man, I think, also is a little bit more timeless in the sense of my kids, every kid just loves Spider-Man, and because he's a youthful character, he's a easier on-ramp for them. And X-Men aren't I'm not trying to say X-Men are. I'm not saying that. But there's a difference
Spider-Man
between
is a much easier lead in to.
He's an A-list, like he's this up here, and there is a gap between X-Men, even Hugh Jackman, and like I was there opening day in the year 2000 when X-Men came out, and I watched X-Men the animated series. That show was huge for people my age at the time, and people still love it. That's why they're bringing it back. So I don't want to I'm not saying like diminishing them in that broad sense, but there is a gap between Spider-Man No Way Home and that energy and some of these other ones. And I think even The Flash showed us that too, of we're bringing back Michael Keaton. And I'm going, wow! That is not what the box office showed.
Yeah.
And Hugh Jackman Wolverine is obviously going to be bigger draw, much bigger impact, still a much more relevant, more recent absolutely. But I think there's a little bit tempering expectations. Spider-Man No Way Home was a bit of in and of itself, it's an anomaly. Of Spider-Man is a character of a unique, broad generational appeal.
Yeah.
I will say I'll push back on the idea that the X-Men aren't as popular as Spider-Man, because I think if you traditionally look at the comics, the X-Men are like the most popular comic run, like outside of Spider-Man. Like they're like, people know the X-Men as being like they were more popular than the Avengers. Like they were the X-Men.
That's
and
true.
Spider.
That is 100% true. Like especially like people my age.
Yeah.
Like my wife didn't know who the Avengers were when Nick Fury shows up, and then we're going to do the Avengers Initiative. My wife's like, "What does that mean?" She had no clue, but she watched X-Men the animated series. Like, "Oh, I love the Dark Phoenix saga." Like, she could tell you plot lines from X-Men the animated series.
Yeah,
X-Men. I like that. What you're saying right now, that is true.
And this is sort of what I think. It's like, because I agree. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man films came out and they kind of took the world by storm, and I do agree. I think they're a little bit more of an easier entryway into this thing than the X-Men, which I think are a bit more mature and dealing with, social themes, adult stuff as well. But I do think one of the big things with the X-Men is that the reason they've kind of dwindled in popularity over the years isn't because of a lack of care for the characters. It's because the movies have been so horrendously inconsistent. Like, you get X2, which is often regarded as one of the greatest comic book films of all time, and then you follow that up with X-Men The Last Stand, which I think soured a lot of people on X-Men on the big screen. And then you follow that up with X-Men Origins Wolverine, and you almost kill everything and that's why I think it's been kind of a difficult upswing for X-Men on the big screen, even though like First Class was great, Days of Future Past was great. But then they kind of fell back into the same issue with Apocalypse not being super good, and then Dark Phoenix just really the whole thing goes out on a whimper. And so this is also part of the reason why
New Mutants.
Well, that movie doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
I think even to that point, one of the problems is the last time we got just normal X-Men movie was almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, we've gotten a lot of X-Men movies, but it's like it feels a little different. Like, we're going to do the prequel one, and it's not necessarily the A-list.
Yeah.
And we had Wolverine movies coming up, but it's not Wolverine with Cyclops. It's not that A-list version of it that we in Days of Future Past had a lot more of that, and therefore it's widely regarded. And so they're not great like on-ramp. Make the broad audience love the X-Men.
Right.
They're not the best to give you the flavor of it.
Yeah.
And the movies that were that came out almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's created a weird scenario of like, oh, we're rebooting the X-Men. It feels kind of soon. And at the same time, it's like, no, it's not soon at all. That's what it's needed. It's a franchise that, obviously all of us agree. Logan's one of the best movies in that franchise, maybe the best movie in that franchise. And it came out only 5 years ago. And at the same time, it was like a patchwork franchise in this weird way of they wanted to do prequels and they kept it going.
Right.
And it needs a reboot.
Well, I mean, just that's part of the concern with Deadpool 3 is you have all of that baggage from the Fox X-Men. It's like, I guess like you could make this like a send off for that, but like I think Logan was the best you could have gotten at closing that off. And so it's like, if you want to get people excited about X-Men again, make a new X-Men movie, because like this is catering to people who I guess are familiar with the Fox versions of these characters, who want to see these characters again. I think most of the general movie going audience has sort of moved on from them for the reasons that you stated, Sean. And so they really need to be not reinventing, but just like, fixing the X-Men brand in the, the pop culture zeitgeist, especially for the film,